Okay, I'm going to talk to you very briefly about the digestive system. Now let's start with the functions of the digestive system. We're looking at the mechanical and chemical breakdown of food. Now, mechanical breakdown of food, that's the physical breakdown. You're actually cutting the food up into little bits and mushing it into smaller pieces. Now the function of that is to increase the surface area. Now you have to increase the surface area for the chemical breakdown of food. The chemical breakdown of food is enzymes. Enzymes chopping your food down into smaller bits, into soluble microscopic bits, which can then move across the surface of your small intestine and into your bloodstream. So the mechanical breakdown and the chemical breakdown of food. The second function of the digestive system is the absorption of nutrients into the blood. You can absorb some very small molecules across your stomach lining, and you can absorb water across your large intestine, but the vast majority of absorption of food happens across the small intestine. And like I said, your food has to be small, it has to be microscopic, it has to be soluble. Let's look a little bit more in detail at this idea of mechanically breaking your food down to increase the surface area, because that's an absolutely key fundamental part of this topic. Let's imagine we're in the stomach and we've got a piece of food, we've got a lump of protein here, and we've got enzymes, the pepsin enzymes they're called, they're proteases because they break down proteins, and they're bouncing around colliding with these molecules on the surface. Now these molecules on the surface, these are the only ones that the enzymes can break down because the blue ones are on the inside, they're hidden away. We've got a volume of 60, we've got a surface area of 28, so let's see what happens when we chop this in half. We've still got a volume of 60, but now we've got a surface area of 36 because these molecules here, which were previously unavailable for collision with an enzyme, have become available. So what's going to happen now is our chemical digestion of food will be much, much quicker. So the more you break your food down, the larger the surface area and the faster the chemical digestion of your food. So let's move to the first part of the digestive system, the mouth. We've got these incisors at the front, which are used for chopping bits off of your food. We've got these reduced canines here, because we don't really use those anymore. And we've got these premolars and molars, which really do the business of the grinding and the chopping. And they will grind your food up and massively increase the surface area. You've also got salivary ducts here, salivary glands, which will secrete saliva into your mouth, and the functions of the saliva are twofold. Number one, they're for lubricating your food. You could not swallow your food if it weren't lubricated. If you don't believe me, go and eat half a packet of crackers or some other dry food and you'll be coughing out bits of powder because you cannot swallow food if it's completely dry. So you have to lubricate it, and secondly, there's salivary amylase, an enzyme in your saliva which begins the breakdown of starch. So mechanical and chemical breakdown of food begins in the mouth. Your tongue moves the food to the back of your mouth where it forms a thing called a bolus, and that is swallowed down your esophagus. Now you have two tubes going down your neck. One is the esophagus, which goes to your stomach, and one is the trachea that goes to your lungs. You don't want to get them mixed up. Now your food doesn't just fall down a pipe and splash down into your stomach. It's actually pushed down by a process called peristalsis. And the way that works is these circular muscles in your esophagus pinch the tube, making it narrow, and then you've got these longitudinal muscles which push the pinch downwards, which effectively pushes this bolus of food down to your stomach. I like this next idea. This I don't know if this is actually true or not, but I like the idea. The idea that there's a torture, which is that they hang you upside down, and they still feed you, but you still starve to death. The idea is that it would be torture to be fed, but still to starve to death. Because they thought that if you were hanging upside down, then the food couldn't get to your stomach. Which is nonsense, because the peristaltic wave pushes it up to your stomach. And then there's a little circular ring of muscle underneath called the lower esophageal sphincter, which will close and keep the food in your stomach. That's why if you stand on your head, you don't end up vomiting. Well, you might, but you shouldn't. Your food stays in there because this lower esophageal sphincter, this ring of muscle, keeps it shut. If you have something called a hiatus hernia, you get a bit of a problem. Your diaphragm is here, and sometimes this sphincter can pop out of your diaphragm, which means it remains open, and your food and the pH 2,3 hydrochloric acid can come up into your esophagus and give you some pretty horrible heartburn. So we also begin the digestion of protein in the stomach. And that's taken place by an enzyme called pepsin, another protease enzyme. Pepsin starts the breakdown of protein. The final product of protein digestion in the small intestine will be amino acids, tiny little soluble amino acids. They're the constituent parts of proteins. So the chemical breakdown of protein by protease enzymes like protein, the storage of food, mechanical breakdown. Now your stomach has longitudinal and circular muscles and it can grind and twist and turn. Quite often a lot of the noises you hear from your gut are your stomach twisting and turning and bubbles of gas moving through it. You can absorb small molecules, like I said, like water, alcohol, medicines. If you suddenly fill your stomach up with alcohol, you'll feel drunk quite quickly. And the reason for that is because small molecules like alcohol can move directly through your stomach wall and into your bloodstream. So that's a very quick way of getting drunk. Enzymes. Two protease enzymes here. Pepsin, which works in the stomach, has an optimal pH of about 3. And trypsin, which works in your small intestine, has an optimal pH of around 8. So they have completely different characteristics, these two enzymes. Moving on to your small intestine, we've got this little green gland up there called the gallbladder. Now, in your liver, you make something called bile. It's a pretty horrible substance, and it gets stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. It's very alkali, and so it would taste extremely bitter. If you've ever been so sick that you've thrown up so much that you've got a sort of greeny substance, a greeny browny substance in your vomit, and it tastes horribly sour, there's a very good chance that you're throwing up a little bit of bile there. It squirts the bile into the first part of your small intestine, and the job of the bile is to emulsify fats. Now what that is it breaks them down into smaller droplets, again increasing the surface area. So what we've got is this large droplet of fat here, and it gets emulsified. It gets broken down into smaller droplets of fat, larger surface area. Now the fats are called lipids. And what happens now is an enzyme called lipase. If it's got ASE on the end, ASE, it's probably an enzyme, protease, carbohydrate, lipase. And now, like I said before, our lipase enzyme can really get all around there and start the breakdown of lipids into fatty acids and glycerol, which the body can use. So that's lipase enzyme. The small intestine is where a lot of the digestion takes place. The pancreas releases a lot of enzymes like trypsin, which is another protease enzyme. It releases carbohydrate enzymes, and like I said, a lot of the digestion happens here. Also, practically all of the absorption of any nutrients worth having happen in the small intestine. Now, the small intestine is adapted in 3 main ways. It has a very thin wall, obviously, because these nutrients need to pass through the wall and into your bloodstream. It has a very good bloodstream, a high supply of blood there with these capillary networks in every single one of these little projections. And these projections, the third one, these are called villi. And each villi on the surface has further tiny little projections called microvilli. And what this is it's folded and folded and folded and folded. Now what this means is if you were to stretch out your small intestine, it would cover a vast area. And you need this much area to move your food from the gut into your bloodstream. This is an amazing fact. It seems almost like it can't be true, but it is. The absorptive surface area of the small intestine is 250 square meters, the size of a tennis court. Your gut, laid out, flattened out, is the size of a tennis court. And that's how much surface area you need to move your food, your nutrients, into your blood. Okay, nearly there. Moving into the large intestine now. There really is only one function of the large intestine, the one main function, and that is the absorption of water. By this time, most of the nutrients have been taken up, so you have very little left in this. I mean, it's pretty much waste by now. If you're the sort of person who doesn't eat their fruit and veg, and you don't get a lot of roughage in your diet, then there's a fair chance that this basically feces would stay in your large intestine for a long time. And the longer it sits there, the more water draws out of it into your blood, and the drier and drier it gets. It becomes very difficult to pass, and you get constipation. Then when it's ready, the food is moved through the rectum and through the anus and ejected out of the body as waste. So there we go. Very quick sort of journey through the digestive system. Here's a list of some of the enzymes we've been talking about. So we started off with that salivary amylase, which works on starch. In the stomach, we've got the protease enzyme called pepsin. And then we've got another protease enzyme which is released from the pancreas into the small intestine, and that's called trypsin. We've got the lipase enzyme, which breaks down the fats into fatty acid and glycerol. Pancreatic amylase, further starch breakdown, and maltase. So you can see most of the digestion and absorption actually takes place in the small intestine. Okay, there we are. Brief run through. Here's some questions for you. Pause the video now, have a little go at these questions and see how many you get right. The next slide has got all the answers on for you. Thanks for watching.